let's begin with our first speech, and we'll open up with something a bit different. So we've had plenty of old school Zabbix users over here on the stage. And Zabbix is an open source product, and we decided to invite someone who's prominent in the open source community. And the speech will also cover open source. We've invited Beattie from United Kingdom. Dylan is a storyteller, a musician, and a person behind the Rockstar programming language. And I'll let Dylan walk up on the stage and tell more about himself and open source. Welcome, Dylan.
Good morning, folks. How's everybody doing? Who was at the party last night? That's pretty good, right? I got a message from my girlfriend. How's it going? I'm like the band that was Latvia in the Eurovision Song Contest, just rickrolled everybody. And she was like, your job is weird. I'm like, yeah, I know. So yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Dylan Beattie. I write code, I write music, I bash them together to see what's going to happen. And I want to talk to you today about open source. And this whole idea of the cost of free software. Because there is this cycle that I'm sure a lot of you folks in the room can relate to. What happens first is you discover that there is something shiny in the world that you didn't know about a minute ago, but you've just seen it. It's popped up in your advertisements, or one of your friends has gone, hey, have you seen this? And you're like, I need that. I must have that in my life. I will be sad until I have that thing. And so you get online and you order it, or you download it, or whatever it is, and then you get hold of the thing, you're like, it's here. I can set it up, I can unbox it, I can get it on the Wi-Fi and pair it to the Bluetooth and configure it and put all my customizations in. And then, you know, sometimes you have that moment where you're like, hang on a second. Because you bought the new amazing smartwatch that looked really good, and it said, smartwatch will play MP3s, and you're like, awesome, I can get all my old MP3s and listen to them in the gym. And then you're like, I don't see an MP3 facility. I can add a Deezer subscription. I don't know what that is. And it turns out that it can't do quite what you want. Now, it's not that it's not technically capable. It's that it needs a little bit of tweaking. It needs a little bit of setup, a little bit of configuration. Now, if any of you folks are like me, you know that some hackers, we love to tinker. We love to change everything. Like, how many of you folks, you've got an IDE that you've changed the font, and you've changed the colors, and you put a little glow on it, and you've got a typing effect and all that, because that's your happy place. You've tweaked every detail, because this is where you do your work. This is where you spend your time, and you want your workplace to be just wonderful, just perfect. Control every detail of it. And the worst thing you can do to somebody like that is you can say, no, not allowed to do that. Oh, no, that feature is only available with the Premier Subscription Enterprise Platinum plan. Oh, no, you need to activate. Oh, no, you need to do this. Oh, no, you can't do that because we said no. The tech is there, but we are not going to let you do that. In 1980, Xerox donated a laser printer to the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT. Now, Xerox and MIT, they're both kind of really, really big names in the history of information technology. Xerox invented mice and windows and laser printers and Ethernet and all kinds of stuff, and then they killed it all because they didn't want to jeopardize their photocopying business. And MIT, they invented passwords. They invented the Roomba. They built the software that took human beings to the moon. And maybe, just maybe, MIT is where free software was invented. You see, the laser printer had a problem. It did this. How many folks, I realize photocopying is kind of not something a lot of people are familiar with day to day anymore. But you folks have worked in an office with a photocopier, you're making your copies, and the paper jams, and it all gets bunged up, and the alarm goes off, and you open the door, and you have to kind of, pull the paper out like you're getting the dog to let go of the Frisbee. And finally, you get it out, you close the door, you keep making your copies, and off you go. Now, with a photocopier, it happens right there in front of you while you're standing there. So you know that it's happened. You know something went wrong. But a network printer, that's way over there. It's on the other side of the building. And so when the printer jams, you don't know that it jammed. And then you go to get a cup of coffee. You're like, I'll check my printout while I'm over here. And, the printer's jammed. The printer's been jammed all morning. So you clear the jam, and you push the button, and it starts again, and then it jams again. And one of the people who was working at MIT in 1980 is this guy, Richard Stallman, the founder of the Free Software Foundation. Now, I'm sure some of you folks have got opinions about Richard Stallman, RMS he calls himself. We can talk about those afterwards, but I don't think we can tell the story of free and open source software without acknowledging Richard Stallman's role in it, because he had an idea. He's like, we got this laser printer, or this printer. We know that it can detect the paper jam because a little red light comes on, and we know that it has a network connection. So why don't we just modify the printer so that when it jams, it broadcasts a message over the network, and then everyone gets a pop-up on their workstation. They can go and clear the jam. So he goes to Xerox, and he's like, hey, can we get the software, can we get the source code for the printer? And Xerox said no. Actually, somebody said, we have been told not to give Richard Stallman the source code to the Xerox laser printer. Now, there are two versions of the story. There is a version that says that this incident galvanized Mr. Stallman, and that was what inspired his lifelong dedication, his commitment to software being free and open for modification. There is another version that says it pissed him off so much he's still angry about it 40 years later. But I think maybe both stories are true a little bit, but that was the origin, and Richard Stallman himself has spoken many times about the incident with the laser printer and how that was kind of the start of his journey into the world of free software. Now, I keep using this word free. You know, what is free software? Because historically, when we talk about free software, do we mean it's free as in free beer, or do we mean that it's free as in free speech? Because let's talk about free beer, right? Free beer is awesome. Who wants beer? Yeah, we had free beer last night. That was great. Now, let's imagine, how many of you folks, was anyone driving from the party last night? So it's like free beer, but actually you can't drink that because you have to drive your car later. Anyone on medication? Anybody here who just doesn't drink for lifestyle reasons? Anyone here who's not old enough to drink alcohol? Because if you give someone free beer, they didn't pay for it. But almost every country in the world, there are severe restrictions on what you can do with a beer. You can't sell it because you don't have a license from the government. You can't drink it because you got to drive home later. You can't keep it because beer the next morning is really, really bad if it's already open. And so it didn't cost you anything, but you don't actually have any freedom on how you consume the free thing. And we have a bunch of software out there which is free as in free beer. As in it doesn't cost anything. Instagram, Facebook, Google. We don't pay money for these things, but we have no control over how we interact with them. We can't switch off the adverts. You can't, like, if you send me a message on Twitter, I can't reply to that message from Slack. I have to go into Twitter. I have to be part of their ecosystem. Now, software is valuable stuff, right? We all work very hard creating these tools and products which deliver a huge amount of value. That stuff can be expensive. That stuff maybe should be expensive. Let me ask you a question. Any of you folks in here, you ever bought a second-hand car? Or like a second-hand washer dryer, or a second-hand electric guitar? You bought anything, like you've gone through the small idea. Has anyone bought second-hand software? Because some people have, but it tends to be stuff like this. It's antiques, it's little relics, it's original Microsoft Windows 95 still in the box. Because we spend all of this time and all of this money investing in software, but the idea that you can buy software and then use it and then sell it when you're finished, the entire industry has managed to convince us that this is not a thing that exists. You don't buy the software, you just get a license to use it and you can't sell it. Now, when I was a kid, there was a kind of software that was bought and sold secondhand. I believe it still is. And to me, it looked like this. It was computer game cartridges. Because the code for something like Sonic Hedgehog or Super Mario came on a cartridge. And the cartridge and the code, they were basically the same thing. You couldn't copy them. You couldn't replicate them. We didn't have the hardware or the expertise to be able to do that. And so you could buy Sonic Hedgehog, you could play it, then you could sell it. Or you could rent it for the weekend, you could loan it to your friends. Software effectively just became a little plastic brick that you put in your Mega Drive or your Genesis, and it played the game. Now, there were two kinds of kids in my school. There were the computer kids and there were the console kids. And the console kids, they had shaved heads, they had skateboards, and they were always in trouble for lighting stuff on fire. And the computer kids, we had long hair and mountain bikes, and we also lit stuff on fire, but we were smart enough not to get caught. And when we wanted to play computer games, we didn't have to worry about consoles because we had disk drives. Now, we had a choice. We could go and we could buy games in a store. And we're talking games like the original X-Wing and Dungeons & Dragons, Eye of the Beholder and Monkey Island. Now, this was a significant investment. One of these games would have cost about a month's allowance for me, about 30 or 40 pounds in the 90s. So I was like, right, what do I want to do this month? I can buy a new pair of jeans, or I can go to McDonald's every weekend, or I can buy X-Wing or Monkey Island. And so we figured out ways to copy them. And they came up with ways to make the games hard to copy, because we had little cardboard anti-piracy wheels. That was easy. You took it apart and you copied it out with a pencil and put it back together. Because the games companies are like, oh no, we're going to prevent piracy. But we're like, we are bored teenagers with no money. There is nothing you can come up with that we are not going to figure out a way around it eventually. So we could buy the games, or we could copy the games. Now, we knew it was illegal, but not like properly illegal. Like if you made 100 copies of X-Wing and sold them at a market, maybe the police would show up. But if it was just you swapping games in the schoolyard, it didn't really matter. But there was another way of getting hold of software, because in the back of the computer magazines, there were companies that sold free software. And you knew that you weren't paying for the code, you were paying for the disk. You give them, $3 or this is the days before euros, but $3, £3, 3 whatever, and they'd send you disks full of software. And some of this was like demos. It was cut down demonstration versions that you'd play with, and then maybe you'd go and buy the full package. Some of it was public domain. Like, never mind paying for it, we didn't even know who wrote it. It was just kind of out there floating around the web, and we had no idea where it came from. Some of the stuff was shareware, which was you copied it and gave it to your friends, and it was fully featured, but if you liked it, maybe you sent the author a check. Or maybe you just sent them a postcard to say, hey, I really like your word processor, that's kind of cool. Some of it was very weird. There was a thing called the Ford simulator, which was, we're talking IBM PC in the 80s with 4-color graphics, and the Ford Motor Company were like, let's make a game where you can drive Ford motor cars around, and the idea is the game's so good that afterwards you're going to go out and buy a car. Don't think anybody ever bought a car, but it was kind of a fun game. But one of the most successful publishing models was pioneered by this guy. This guy called Scott Miller. He founded a company called Apogee Software. And Scott Miller wrote a PC game called Kingdom of Kroz, which was so big, it wouldn't fit on one floppy disk. The game was 3 megabytes. And so he had a great idea. He's like, well, I'm going to cut the game into 3 pieces. And part 1 is free, and I'll give that away to everyone, and it's in the back of the magazines, and you can download it from a bulletin board service. And if you like it, then you get to the end of part 1, and it says, hey, if you want to play part 2 and 3, send a check to this address, which was his parents' house in Texas, and I'll send you the discs with part 2 and 3. It worked. Kingdom of Kroz made nearly $100,000 in 1980s money. And he set up Apogee, his own publishing company, and started turning out games. Now, he got wind of a game called Dangerous Dave, written by a guy called John Romero, who was working at a publisher out of Louisiana called Softdisk. Romero, along with John Carmack and Tom Hall, they had a little group, kind of a side hustle. It was called Ideas from the Deep, and then it was called ID, and then it was just called ID. And they had figured out how to do smooth sideways scrolling on the IBM PC graphics chip, which no one else had done. Everyone said that was impossible, but no one told Carmack it was impossible, and so he sat down one day and he just did it. And to demonstrate what they'd come up with, they ported Super Mario to the IBM PC, which everyone said was impossible. And they sent the disc to Nintendo and said, hey, what do you think? You want to do Mario on the PC? And Nintendo sent back a letter saying, boys, this is very impressive work. Bury it, or we are going to sue you so hard they won't be able to find the body parts. Nintendo did not want kids copying Mario in the schoolyard because they made money selling all of the cartridges. Scott Miller gets word of this, and he pings the boys and says, look, forget Mario, Nintendo and Mario, but the technology is really impressive. Why don't you come up with new graphics, new characters, a new storyline? You can publish that on my Apogee platform, and we'll do it with the shareware model, and we'll split the proceeds. And they came up with Commander Keen, Invasion of the Vorticons, where you're not an Italian plumber, you're an 8-year-old kid with a pogo stick and a football helmet who has to rescue your babysitter from space aliens. Now, this game was, it was a kind of groundbreaking in terms of its graphics and its gameplay, but it was also groundbreaking in terms of what it did for id. Because it made so much money They quit their jobs, they started churning out games full time, and they released some of the defining games in the history of PC gaming. Wolfenstein 3D was the first full 3D first-person shooter. Doom, network deathmatch. Every college network in America crashed, and the systems admins are like, what's happening? What is all this traffic coming from? And they're like, oh, it's this game. And they're like, people can play games on a network? We need a copy, and they started playing it as well. And then Quake came along in 1997, and it was one of the first games to use 3D accelerator cards, one of the first games that had an active mod scene, people making their own levels and extending the game. These were milestones in PC gaming technology, but they were also milestones in how software got distributed. I got Wolfenstein on the cover of PC Format magazine. I got Doom copied from a friend of mine I was at college with, and I downloaded Quake from the id Software World Wide Web page. Now this was, if you look closely, there's this lovely little detail in history when you maybe had an internet connection at school, but you didn't have one at home, so you could download it in 7 files to copy onto disks to take back to your house. And of course, then everyone gets internet at home, the world becomes a completely different place. Now, this is around 1997, and a lot of people are getting online, people are getting connected, email's gone mainstream, the web has gone mainstream. A whole bunch of us are getting in touch with the kind of internet community for the first time. And when we get there, we discover that there is a bunch of people out there who have been doing free software for a lot longer than we have. And to them, free software has nothing to do with whether it came on the cover of a magazine. To them, free software is about the 4 essential freedoms. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study how the program works and modify it to do what you want. Freedom 2 is the freedom to distribute copies, and freedom 3 is the freedom to share your modifications. And then a couple of years later, somebody says, this doesn't actually say we can run the program, and so they came and they put freedom 0 in at the beginning, which is a freedom to run the program however you want for any purpose. These were, and are, the philosophy underlying the GNU project. Now, this was set up by Richard Stallman in 1983 with the explicit goal of developing a completely free, as in free speech, Unix-compatible operating system. And they got to work. They created a C compiler, they had a linker, they had a parser, they had text editors and modification tools, they had a file system. They had just about everything, collaborating on bulletin boards and giving away pieces over FTP servers. The one thing that they didn't have an operating system kernel, which is a little bit like saying you're going to invent a car, and then you're like, right, we got a stereo, we got a steering wheel, the wheels are good, we got the wing mirrors, and engine, yeah, we're still working on that part. But I think the most significant thing they came up with was something called the GPL, the GNU General Public License, which was them sitting down with a bunch of lawyers and going, look, can we turn our 4 essential freedoms into something that might actually stand up in court? Now, around 1991, they're still trying to figure out this whole missing kernel piece, and then this guy pops up, Linus Torvalds, who is a 21-year-old student. He's at the University of Helsinki, and he announces on Usenet that he's working on a free operating system. It's just a hobby. It won't be big and professional like GNU for 386 and 486 AT clones, and he uploads the source code for his kernel to the university's FTP server. By December 1991, the Linux kernel has been published under the GNU General Public License, and for the first time in history, we have a completely free operating system, free as in beer, free as in speech, that you can download. It's got a compiler, it's got text editors. It's a tool you can use to build the next generation of tools. You can run it, you can modify it, you can give it away for free, you can even sell it as long as you don't impose any restrictions on the person you're selling it to. That's probably a good point to ask why. Why did all these people do all this work and give it away for free? I think for Linus Torvalds, he's 21 years old, he's done a cool thing. He's like, hey everyone, look at my cool thing, I made a thing. I think for the boys from id Software, John Carmack and John Romero, they were like, we want to write games and we want to play games. And that's what we want to do, and this is a model that allows us to make enough money to keep doing that. But I think for Stallman and the Free Software Foundation, giving the code away was like, it was them executing their philosophy. So I'm going, we think this is important, and so we are actually going to do the thing instead of just talking about it. Now, at this point in history, we haven't talked about open source yet. And the reason is, Open source, the phrase, no one had used that yet. This is around, like I said, 1997, 1998, and what is happening, the web is taken off in a big way. The first generation of the World Wide Web, lots of companies all over the world are like, what is this web thing? Now, I was building web pages around the time that this happened, and what would normally happen is there'd be a company, they had an IT department. They would do like the Oracle database and the Novell network and all that kind of stuff. They didn't care about the web because the web looked like a silly children's toy they didn't care about. But the marketing people could see potential in this. And so somebody like me would get said, hey, can you build us a website? We're not going to give you any money or any hardware or any help. We'll give you an internet connection if you're lucky. And so we started looking, all right, well, how do we build a website for no money? And there was a web server built into Windows 95. It was terrible. It was not very good. And we were looking around for something better. And this is where a bunch of companies saw an opportunity. Companies like Red Hat popped up and they went, well, hang on, all of the pieces exist. We've got a web server, we've got an operating system, we've got all the other databases, tools that you need to do this. What if we put all those in a box, we make sure they work together, we'll compile everything for x86 and 386 and 486 hardware, and we'll sell it to you in a box with a nice support phone number so you can ring us if you get stuck. It's free software, and it's only $79.99. And of course, you go to your boss and you're like, hey, can I have $80 for free software? And the boss is like, no, it's free. Just use the free. And you're like, yeah, but if we pay $80, we get support. And he's like, no, I'm not giving you money for free software. And this was the problem which started kind of percolating out through the industry, is how could you build a business on top of something that had free written on top of it? Now, this is Christine Peterson. She's the founder of the Foresight Institute. She is the person who came up with the phrase open source. And as she puts it, those who are new to the term free software, they assume it is referring to the price. Old-timers must then launch into an explanation, usually given as follows: we mean free as in freedom, not free as in beer. At this point, a discussion on software has turned into one about the price of an alcoholic beverage. And she's meeting with people from Netscape and Red Hat and all these kind of people around the time. And she says, between meetings, I was focused on the need for a better name, and I came up with the term open source software. This caught on in a big way. A week later, Eric Raymond and Bruce Perens, they set up opensource.org. Software gets honest. Tim O'Reilly is organizing a big free software summit. That becomes the Open Source Summit in April 1998. And, this was not just about getting rid of the word free or trying to tackle the word free head on. It was also about addressing a complex but a legitimate concern that was beginning to get a lot of traction in the industry. The GNU General Public License is sometimes referred to as a viral license because there is a clause in that license that says you may not impose any further restrictions on the exercise of the rights granted herein. I have the right to give the software away to you for free, but I do not have the right to stop you giving it away to your friends and them giving it away to their friends and their friends and their friends. And the mechanism that's used to enforce this is it's kind of ironic because it's enforced using copyright. If you create work, you own that work. It is your copyrighted work. If I write some code, I can allow you to use that code under a license, and copyright is the mechanism that enforces that license. So if I give you the code and I tell you you have to give it away for free and you don't, you have violated the license, therefore copyright says I can sue you. Now, this was hypothetical for quite a long time, until the early 2000s. This thing comes along, Linksys WRT54G. It's a little home Wi-Fi router with a network card in it, and this thing runs a Linux kernel, and it's got a bunch of GNU software in it. And 2003, a guy called Andrew Miklas downloaded the firmware for this thing from their website, and he unzipped it, and he's like, oh, this is interesting. There's a Linux kernel here, and there's a bunch of GNU networking tools. Where's the source code? The reason they wanted the source code is anyone here, did any of you folks ever try and get Wi-Fi working on Linux in 2002? Because it sucked. You'd be like, hey, I need a Wi-Fi driver for Linux for my laptop, and the laptop manufacturers would be like, what's Linux? What are you doing? Why don't you just use Windows like a normal person? We really, really wanted the drivers. This thing had Broadcom Wi-Fi chips in it, and it ran Linux, which meant they had drivers, which meant they should have published the source code, and they hadn't. And so the community was like, now, there's a bit of a gap in the timeline here. 2003, Linksys released the GPL code for this thing. Somebody, got hold of their lawyers and was like, you need to publish the code because this is GPL software. And they did. Then there's a 5-year gap, and then the Free Software Foundation sued them anyway. Partly, I think, because in the meantime, Linksys had been acquired by Cisco. And Cisco is a big company with a lot of lawyers. Now, I think what the Free Software Foundation was trying to do here is they were trying to get a judgment. They were trying to get this lawsuit into a court so a judge would say, yes, the GNU public license is legally binding this was in the United States of America. What actually happened is Cisco turned around and go, no, we don't want to take this to court. How much money would you like to make this go away? And they appointed a compliance officer and they published all the source code and stuff. The only case that I'm aware of where the GPL has actually gone to court was in Germany. There's a guy called Harold Velter who sued D-Link for distributing a network-attached storage device with GPL software on it that they hadn't published source code to. And this went all the way to the Frankfurt District Court, and they said, yes, as far as we are concerned, the GPL is a legally binding document and it has legal status under German law. Now, the dawn of the open source movement, 1998, none of this stuff had happened yet. This all kind of unfolded over the subsequent years. But it was pretty clear that it was going to happen. And this was making a lot of people kind of very wary of the GPL. In 2001, Steve Ballmer, who was the CEO of Microsoft, he did like a radio interview at a talk at a trade show somewhere in the US. And he came out with this absolute humdinger of a quote. He said, Linux is a cancer that attaches itself in an intellectual property sense to everything it touches. That is the way the license works. Now, Steve Ballmer is wrong. He's only wrong about 3 things. 1, he's wrong about Linux. 2, he's wrong about intellectual property. And 3, he's wrong about cancer, because that's not how any of these things work. But it didn't matter. This was a great quote, and it made headlines, and the IT press all over the world is like, Ballmer, Linux is cancer. In the intervening 25 years, Microsoft has done a dramatic U-turn, about-face on open source software. A lot of the stuff that Microsoft produces now is published under open licenses, and the reason for that is cloud. In 1998, Microsoft owned the desktop, and the desktop owned business computing. That's where all the money was. If companies started running Linux instead of Windows, goodbye Microsoft, they have no future. Cloud has changed everything because it unlocks a completely new way to make money out of, oh yeah, the code is free. Oh yeah, your tools are free, the operating system's free, database is free, but you're gonna need somewhere to run it. Do you have a credit card? Step into my data center. And this is, now when I first started out in the 90s building websites and stuff, companies would ask me to build them a web server. And I'd be like, yeah, I can build you a web server. I'd charge them a couple of £1,000 and then a maintenance fee for it. And then I'd get on the phone to Dell and I'd order a box and I'd wait maybe 3 to 6 business weeks. And the box would turn up and I'd get a friend to help me carry it up the stairs and we'd put it in the rack and put Apache and MySQL and all these kinds of things on it. Now, in theory, if I had 50 people ring me up in the morning and go, hey, build me a web server, woohoo, I just made £100,000 in a day. In practice, there is no way I could build 50 web servers in a day. We didn't have the supply chain, and that's the problem that cloud fixes, is if you need 50 web servers by lunchtime, hey, it's no problem. You got a credit card, put it here, tick, 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 done, bang, there you go. There is your distributed cloud infrastructure. And along the way, a lot of companies they're making a significant amount of money off free software. Let me tell you about Sammy. Sammy the squirrel. And Sammy lives in the woodland with all of the other little woodland animals. And every Sunday morning, all the woodland folk, they gather in the glade with the fallen tree stump, and they do woodland show and tell. And they show off the projects they've been working on. And Sammy likes to make retro-style computer games. So one week, Sammy turns up, and Sammy's like, hey, I made Acorn Adventure. And the other animals are like, oh, this is fun. And you get to play a little squirrel who runs around the forest and gathers acorns and everything. And the next week when they arrive for show and tell, Jeff the raccoon is there, and Jeff has bought an arcade cabinet. And you got to put 50 cents in to have a go on the game. And Sammy thinks this is amazing. Like, look at that. That's my game on an actual arcade cabinet with real buttons. This is so cool. And the little animals are lining up and they're saying, Dad, I need 50 cents to play Acorn Adventure. Next week, Jeff shows up in a brand new pickup truck, and he's got 2 arcade machines. And, the animals are still loving the game, but they're starting to complain because they're getting towards the end. And, towards the end of the game, it gets a lot harder. And some of the graphics, they aren't quite finished, and there's some problems with the music. And, Sammy says to them, well, it's open source. It's free software. You can fix it. You can modify it. But, of course, it's not free to them. They've been paying 50 cents every time they play the game. And so Sammy tries to explain that this is free software and everything, but it doesn't work. And they're like, we want money back. Now, next week, Jeff turns up in a solid gold helicopter. But that's all right, because Sammy has been hard at work, and Sammy has created Acorn Adventure 2. Better graphics, better gameplay, better story, better everything. It's new and it's improved, and it's still free. You can take it home, you can run it at school, you can put it on your website, but if you want to run it on your pay-to-play arcade machine cabinet, you have to give Sammy a cut of the profits. Oh, no. The woodland animals, they don't like that. They said, you said this would always be free. How dare you? You've done an open source rug pull. You're a traitor. You've betrayed us. Some of them, they take the last version of Acorn Adventure and they fork it. And they put it on GitHub and they say it's called Open These Nuts and it will always be free. Now, how did we get there? How did Sammy give away all this code that they slaved on for long nights and everything, and then they just put one little detail in like, hey, if you're getting rich, I'd like a little piece of this, and now everybody hates them? Or maybe that's not what happened. Maybe one day Wilbur shows up, Wilbur the Weasel, and is like, hey, Sammy, having some trouble with your software there, friend. Why don't you let me help out? And Wilbur starts contributing, a little bit of graphics there, some music here, and slowly builds the trust of the community and gets to the point where Wilbur has commit access to the Git repository where Acorn Adventure runs. And then one day, somebody notices one of the big features they all voted on with their red stickers. They want to be able to pay by credit card so they don't have to keep getting 50-cent coins. And so they put in a credit card reader for it, and everyone's swiping their MasterCard, and then someone notices every time they swipe the MasterCard, a copy of the credit card numbers is going to a server in North Korea. And maybe this is not a good idea. And suddenly, they're like, where did this code come from? And they're like, oh, well, Wilbur contributed that. Wilbur's vanished. We don't know where Wilbur went. Come to think of it, we don't know the other animals, the angry animals who were shouting at everyone about not shipping features fast enough. We're not quite sure where they went either. And we hadn't really seen them around before. Free and open source software has succeeded in ways that we could not have imagined when we first started using the term open source in the 90s. There are trillion-dollar companies out there right now who've made a substantial part of their revenue using open source software, taking free software, putting it on their cloud, running it, using it to build businesses, revenue streams, in some cases just reselling it directly. Now, the Free Software Foundation, they saw this coming a long time ago. It's a company called Affero in the early 2000s were building a bunch of web stuff on top of GPL software, and they're like, well, the GPL says that if we distribute the software, we got to give away copies of it, but we're not actually giving people copies, we're just running it on our web server. Can we come up with a more bulletproof license? And that is the AGPL, the Affero GPL. And Zabbix, interestingly, it's one of the few really high-profile projects I've seen that uses the AGPL. And this is the thing that says even if you just run this code on your server and other people can come and browse it, then legally you have to give away copies of all of your modifications to that source code. Now, the reason why the AGPL to me is interesting, particularly in the age of AI coding assistants, is we got these tools out there in the cloud which have been trained on lots and lots and lots of code. And a lot of that code is open code, and some of that code is under the Affero GPL. And let's imagine that you're working for Netflix, and you're using Copilot. And one day, Copilot accidentally puts a function into your code, which is AGPL. Maybe they got it from Zabbix, I don't know. And then you merge that, it goes through review, it goes live. Technically, you've now published AGPL code onto the Netflix platform. So legally, Netflix now has to give away all their source code, legally. Now, that's never going to happen because Netflix has got more lawyers than the people who write free software, but that is the mechanism by which the AGPL license is supposed to operate, is to say, look, you're welcome to use our stuff, but you've got to pay it forward. You've got to keep giving us back and contributing to making the world a better place. Now, The vast majority of projects out there, particularly open source libraries and packages, they don't use the GPL or the AGPL. They use one of the permissive licenses, Apache, the Berkeley Systems Distribution BSD license, or the MIT license. Now, the MIT license, we're talking here, .NET is under the MIT license, Ruby on Rails, Android, Node.js, Angular, React, Kubernetes, Terraform, all kinds of stuff. This is the MIT license. This is the whole thing. You don't need a lawyer to read this. It says 4 things. It says, we own the software, do anything you like, don't remove the license, and you can't sue us if the software doesn't work. And that's basically it. That's the whole thing. The BSD and Apache licenses, they're kind of this, but then with about an extra 15 pages to cover what happens with patents and trademarks and those kinds of things. Now, if you are contributing code to one of the projects which is published under one of these licenses, quite often you will have to sign a contributor license agreement, because even though the code is free, the foundation or the organization that sponsors development, they want a paper trail of where the ownership of that code has gone. If you contribute some code to React, you have to sign Meta's open source contributor license agreement, which means that even though React is free and open software, it's owned by Meta. They own the copyright. You sign your donation over to them, which means if they really wanted to, they could turn around and say that React version 20, 21, 22, they control the copyright. They could make that closed source. They could say, well, the old version's free, but new version's going to cost you $5 million or something. So why do people do it? Why do we sign a CLA that takes our hard work and transfers the copyright for free to somebody else? Well, in some cases, it's because you get paid. Any of you folks in here make a living writing free software that you then give away? Because a lot of the code that is actually in Linux, PostgreSQL, these kinds of platforms, is written by salaried employees of companies like Microsoft. You know, they have Microsoft, Amazon, they have engineers who do this stuff. They give it away for free. Yeah, that's where the profit comes from. A lot of people are like, well, I don't actually care about it. It's good fun. That's it. Have fun, the end. But there's a bunch of people out there going, I don't get it. I built this library, and I put it on the internet, and now Amazon is using it to make $1 trillion, and my rent is going up, and my bills are going up, and, you know, how did this all work out? Now, what has been happening over the last couple of years is more and more companies have, organizations, project maintainers have been going, yeah, maybe it's time to change the rules a little bit. Let me talk you through a little timeline. This happened, this is about October last year, and there is about a month of just unbelievable chaos. You folks are familiar with WordPress, big open source blogging content management platform published under the GPL, GNU Public License, and resold by a lot of companies around the world who take WordPress and they use that as part of their own commercial platform. One of those companies is a company called WP Engine. And September last year, there was a dispute between WP Engine and Matt Mullenweg, who is now Matt is interesting because he is the CEO of Automatic, which is the commercial company that controls WordPress. But he's also the chief executive of the WordPress Foundation, which is the open source charity nonprofit that administers the GPL code. Which means there's about 15 different ways that Matt Mullenweg might one day have to sue himself for violating his, I don't get it. Anyway, WP Engine did something that he didn't like, and he wrote this blog post where he's like, WP Engine's not WordPress, and it's confusing, and they're piggybacking on our marketing, and the allegation was that they should be giving more back to the community, and they're like, well, no, that's not the license, there's just a thing you think we ought to do. He says it's something they've chopped up, hacked, butchered to look like WordPress, but they're giving you a cheap knockoff and charging you more. This is one of the many reasons they are a cancer to WordPress. That lovely word again. Why do people keep using that? Then WordPress plugin infrastructure, they decide to add a tick box to it. You can't log in to get updates and plugins unless you tick a box saying, I don't work for WP Engine in any way, financially or otherwise. Then Matt Mullenweg goes online with this, WP Engine is free to offer their hacked up, bastardized simulacra of WordPress's GPL code to their customers, and they can experience it, WordPress as WP Engine envisions it, with them getting all the profits and providing all the services. Well, yeah, They can, they are absolutely free to do that. Do you know why? Because Matt Mullenweg, who wrote that, published WordPress under the GNU General Public License, which has these 4 essential freedoms in it. And for about a month, this thing just plays out its total chaos. Automatic turns around to all of their staff and says, hey, look, if you don't like what's going on, we'll give you a bunch of money to walk away. And a lot of them do. 159 people are like, yeah, I don't want to be anywhere near this thing. One of the people who didn't is Jeffrey Zeldman, the web standards advocate, one of the most influential people in the history of the free and open web. And he wrote this blog post saying, I stayed. My insight in corporate legal disputes is as meaningful as my opinion on quantum mechanics. I chose to stay at Automatic. I don't know why Jeff chose to stay, but this is the kind of thing that makes me think there's something else going on behind the scenes here. WordPress.org, they take over a plugin. They seize control of somebody else's code that used to belong to WP Engine, and they're like, no, we're taking control of this because security concerns. Lawyers get involved, sponsorship for events is getting pulled, people are told, oh, well, if you've got that company exhibiting at your trade show, we're not going to support you anymore. The whole thing, there's a judgment on it. Basically, it's this. It's trying to make sense of the state of the WordPress ecosystem at this point last year. You're just like, who wins here? You know who wins here? Lawyers. The only people who win anything in this whole thing are lawyers. But I think all of this happened because on some level, Matt Mullenweg wishes he hadn't made it GPL. I think Matt wants to be able to charge money for it, and he can't, and he's angry about it. Now, we're going to talk about .NET for a moment, just because it's an ecosystem that I know very well. .NET is open source. You can get all the code for that. Steve Ballmer would be very, very angry about this, but hey, he's finished. It's a new world now. You can go online, you can get all of .NET, you can keep copies of it on your server, which means that if it disappears tomorrow, you could rebuild the whole thing, and your company could keep on trucking. This is one of the fundamental freedoms of open source. Zabbix, I believe, is the same. All the code is on a public Git repo, right? So in theory, if Zabbix stopped existing tomorrow, you've all got copies of all the code, right? So you can build it yourself. Oh, I know you do, because it's your company. This is a nice idea. Like, oh, it's fine. We've got security against disruption in the market or network outages or supply chain attacks or ransomware because we could take our own copy of the code. Most of us don't do that, but it's kind of nice to know that we could. One concrete lesson that we can learn, WordPress is one example of this going on. Redis was another one. A couple of years ago, WordPress decided that they're going to switch Redis decided they're going to switch their licensing because Amazon is out there making a bunch of money basically just selling Redis. They're not improving it, they're not contributing it. They're just like, hey, $100 a month, we'll give you a Redis instance. And so Redis go, nope, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to distribute it under the BSD license, but there's a clause in there that says you cannot offer paid Redis as a service unless you have paid us for a license. This made a lot of people very angry for about a year, and then earlier May this year, they went, actually, you know what? Nah, we're going to go all the way to the other extreme. We're going to go a Pharaoh GPL. Hey, Amazon, you want to run Redis in AWS Cloud? Fantastic. You got to give your contributions back to the community. And a bunch of companies kind of popped up and they started coming up with how are we going to run Redis. Some of them just bought licenses. Some of them took the last version that was still properly free, and they forked it. Some people built their own sort of replicas for the thing. That slide shouldn't be there. Now, we don't know what is going to happen in the future, but we can learn from looking at the past. Service Stack is a library on the .NET platform for building APIs and message-based interfaces and applications. And Service Stack did this before it was cool. In 2013, they changed their licensing model from being MIT licensed to a hybrid license where if you want to use it in a for-profit corporation, you've got to pay them money. It's 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. And I emailed Demis, the guy who created it, and I was like, look, all these companies, Redis, WordPress, we got all this stuff going on, Terraform is doing it. How did it go with Service Stack? What happened after that? And I got this lovely email back from him. He said, so he quit a job at Stack Exchange to go and do this commercially. A decade of development later, the software itself has greatly improved. It's much more capable than what was possible as a side project. I was pleasantly surprised. It ended up making more money than any job I had had. And Service Stack has allowed our family to be financially independent, giving me the freedom to work on whichever features I want. So he took the free thing, and he said, well, you can still have the code, but if you want to use it to make money, you've got to give us money. And it's gone from strength to strength. Service Stack is still out there. It's doing great. Now, what generally happens with these kind of packages and libraries is when they announce the license change, a bunch of angry people in the community, they take the last version and they fork it. And they say, we're doing this one, and this one's always going to be free. And that's exactly what happened. End service kit. People forked it. For about a year, it was getting some attention, but this is dead. Like, it's 9 years since anyone committed any code to that project. Because when you fork your license like that, what you do is all of the kind of the people who are prepared to invest in it, most of them will come with you on the journey. They're like, this is good software, we like having the code, and we accept that it's the good thing to do is to pay a bit of money for it. And the freeloaders, they're all going to go with the fork, which means they get all of the high-maintenance customers, shall we call them. And of course, Wilbur the Weasel, Wilbur's not a weasel at all. Wilbur is, well, we don't know. Wilbur might be a person. Wilbur might be a, a cyber hacking group. Wilbur might be a malicious nation-state actor, as they call them. This is a phenomenon we are starting to see where somebody out there is using a combination of supply chain attacks and social engineering to try to get malware into significant packages. There's a package called the XZUtils, which is it's a Linux compression library that is used as part of the login process in quite a lot of systems around the planet. This is the contributor dashboard for that project, going back to 2008. Almost all of the code for it was this one person, Laju. The second most prolific contributor is this person, Jia Tan, who's done 451 commits starting around about 2021, 2022. Now, that point right there, it's about the same time that a bunch of people on the project mailing list start harassing the maintainer. You need to merge these pull requests faster. This isn't good enough. You need to ship stuff. You need more progress. This thing needs to go quicker. And then Jia Tan pops up out of nowhere and says, hey, I can help you out with that, and gets to a point where they have commit access to the repo and they can access the build pipelines for it, and comes very, very close to compromising quite a lot of the computers on the planet. The only reason we caught this, the XZUtils backdoor, is a guy called Andreas Fraum, who's a security researcher at Microsoft, who was doing some benchmarking, which means basically shutting down everything on the computer that's not supposed to be there, and notices that the authentication, the login daemon, is like using way more processor than it should, and goes digging and discovers this incredibly sophisticated combination of social engineering to get the project maintainer to give people commit access maybe faster than they would have done otherwise, and then malicious tampering with the build pipeline and the supply chain to do things like putting binaries up onto package managers like RPM, which weren't built from the same source code that you could go and get from the GitHub repository, all of these kinds of things, and came very, very close to this backdoor just getting sneaked out. Now, at that point, we don't know who this was. We don't know what they were trying to do with it. We don't know how long they would have waited before exploiting this. But in theory, they'd have got root on quite a lot of important computers at hospitals and banks and airlines. And that would be bad, right? Now, the problem is pressure. If we had all the time and all the money and none of us was worried about anything, I'm sure everyone in this room, we would write amazing code, right? It would be beautiful, it would be fast, we'd fix all the things, it would work properly on mobile, and all our images would have alt tags, and all of our databases would be indexed, and we know all the things that you have to do to make software which is inclusive and performant and secure and all the other things. But time is money, and the boss is breathing down your neck, and the people on the mailing list are angry, and you've got to get the thing finished, and you've got to ship it. And so a lot of us get to a point where we're like, oh, well, we've done the thing, but now, it'd be nice if we had more time to make it good, but time is money, so could you please contribute something to this? And so you go, hey, our free software well, it's not completely free. It's not free for you because you're a trillionaire, and it's not free for that. And this is where the backlash starts. Now, I'm going to say something, this is probably the single most important takeaway from this entire talk. People who solve problems with code, and they put that code on the internet, and they give it away, and you can come and you can use it, and it doesn't cost money, and you don't have to pay for it. Those people do not owe you anything. If I share my code with you, I don't want to support it. I don't want email from you because it doesn't work on your machine. I've given you a gift. That's it. It's out there. It's free. If it solves your problem, fantastic. Please use it with my blessing. If it doesn't work, I don't give a crap. If it's that important to you, pay me. Give me a support contract. Hire somebody of your own to do it. Maybe contribute your changes back to the community. There is so much amazing code out there that we can find and we can download and we can use to solve our problems without having to pay for it. We have control over how that code forms part of our own strategy. And there are people for whom that is not good enough. There are people whom I want more. I need support. You need to fix this. There's this edge case that you've got to support because it matters to my company. The opposite extreme here, I use Adobe Creative Suite a lot. I pay $50 a month for Adobe Creative Suite because I have to. Because if I stop paying, the programs go away. They just stop working, and I can't open any of my video projects. I can't open any of my training courses. I'm locked in that walled garden there. If Adobe turn around and go, yeah, $100 a month, let's crank the pricing, I probably have to pay it. If they say $500 a month, I have a big problem. If Adobe goes bankrupt and their authentication servers disappear, well, game over. I've lost 15 years worth of work. And some people are like, well, that's your fault. You should be using free and open tools. And I'm like, all right, what are the free and open alternatives to the Adobe Creative Suite? And the answer that always comes back is, you can do it Blender and the GIMP. No, you can't. Some of it. But to me, like Blender and the GIMP is a cop show from the 1970s that didn't get made. Now, I love the ethics behind the Free Software Foundation. I love that the GNU general public license exists. I love that Linux exists in the world, and it's free and it's open, and no one can ever take it away from us. But I'm still seeing, and I'm sure you're still seeing, at all kinds of different scales in this industry, this problem of sustainability, of giving something away for free and then trying to turn that into even a relatively modest revenue stream to ensure that the project maintainers can keep fixing bugs and supporting new hardware and shipping new versions. Now, I mentioned a moment ago the convenience of the cloud and how companies like 50 web servers, click, 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 MasterCard, bang, done. Cloud is basically Spotify for infrastructure. How many of you folks use Spotify, Google Play, anything like that? I use Spotify, I use Tidal. I used to buy music. I used to buy CDs. I've been listening to music on Spotify for 5 years now. I don't own anything. Like, I don't own any of that music. If it goes away tomorrow, I can't listen to any of that stuff anymore. Cloud is like that. You want to listen to the new Taylor Swift album, except it's not Taylor Swift, it's a 64-core Postgres cluster? Well, yeah, click here, bang, it's yours for as long as you pay for it. The second you stop paying for it, it's gone away. But the thing about cloud is that companies out there, they're already paying for it. If you've ever tried to get a company to sponsor an open source project, a lot of the time they're like, we don't even have a form for that. Like, what are we buying? How do we do this? Do we need compliance? Do we need to go through that? But most companies have a cloud bill that just gets paid every month without anyone really paying attention to it. So if we could work out a way to get a little extra 10, 50, 100,000 euros onto that cloud bill that they pay every month and distribute some of that back into the open source ecosystem. Now, the worked example I'm going to use here, the .NET community, the ecosystem there has a package manager called NuGet. I'm going to use that because they publish very transparent statistics. How many packages, how often are they updated, all this kind of stuff. So I crunched some numbers on the NuGet ecosystem because I wanted to see what happened if we created a Spotify for open source packages. And so I pulled out the most downloaded package stats, and I did some blackboard arithmetic. We got 53,767,000,000 downloads every 6 weeks. So that's roughly 40 billion downloads a month. There's about 2.5 million active users. That one I had to kind of guess. They don't publish usage statistics, but I basically looked at what I download. I'm like, well, if I'm average, then this is how it plays out. So that gives us, let's come up with a plan here. We're going to say half the people in the world, they just use it for free because they're students, they're nonprofits, they're enthusiasts, so they're just not making very much money. These people here, they're on the basic plan. That's the same kind of price point as Spotify. This is the indie plan for small studios, and then the big players, they get the enterprise, the all-you-can-eat plan for $500 a month. This gives us $43 million a month to redistribute. Now, if we take 40 billion downloads, over $40,000. That gives us 0.001. Now, at this point, it doesn't matter if it's euros or dollars. It's this tiny, tiny amount of money. 1,000 package downloads is going to make you $1, which is terrible. That's worse than Spotify pays for music streams. And Spotify is horrible, and everyone hates it because they don't pay their artists properly. But for sustainable open source, it's still way better than anything the rest of the world has ever had. This means the top end, the most popular packages there, we're bringing in like $13,000 a month for an open source package. That's enough money to hire engineers to fix bugs and write documentation and keep things up to date. Middle of the road, Image Sharp, that's an image processing library. You know, it's not up here, it's not down here, it's kind of in the middle. $3,000 a month. There are parts of the world where that's quit your job and hire engineer money. There are parts of the world where that's like, boss, I'm going to take a sabbatical, or I'm going to do 4-day weeks so I can use Fridays to ship my new open source project. And right at the bottom, the one-person hobby projects, 120, you know, that's not a lot, but hey, it's a new laptop every 3 years. Or it's, you know, take the kids to Disneyland to say sorry for spending every weekend in the shed. Now, this is not going to happen because this is capitalism, and spending money on free things is generally considered not to be a winning move. But we have seen something like this before. We've seen paying for the convenience of free software in a format that is easy to consume, because we've seen Slackware, we've seen Red Hat, we've seen the open source ecosystem there. If we try to retrofit this onto something that already exists, that's probably not going to work, because the animals are going to get angry, because it used to be free and now it's not. But there is something coming, something which is potentially a game changer for the whole way that we distribute packages and bundles and components for software. WebAssembly is becoming a big deal, because we can run code in a browser that is not written in JavaScript. It's written in C. It's written in Java, it's written in C# or Rust or COBOL. Anything you like can compile to WebAssembly. And the WebAssembly system interface is basically packages for WebAssembly, and it doesn't matter what language they're written in. So I could be building a JavaScript application to do video, and if you've got a great video transcoding library that's written in C, I can compile that to WebAssembly, give you a package, bang, we're laughing, which means we're going to end up with a massive online repo somewhere of WebAssembly packages and products and platform components and that kind of stuff. And of course, we're going to do what we do every time. We're going to rush in headlong and go, let's make it free, and then be like, oh, crap, maybe we shouldn't have done that. We've done free as in beer. Open source is 25 years old, and you know, it's awesome. There are millions of people out there writing code and building systems and having fun with software that did not cost them any money. And we've done free as in free speech, and that's also awesome. But we've seen the pressure, we've seen the social engineering, we've seen the vulnerabilities and the supply chain attacks. And maybe there's a third kind of free that we can start to think about. Because you ever wake up on like a Saturday morning and you're like, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I'm not going to get paged. I'm not worried about being on call. I'm not worried about my boss phoning me and saying there's a problem. This is freedom from responsibility. It is freedom from guilt, freedom from fear. It is, I think, another kind of free, because I'd like a world where software is secure and open and sustainable. And you can take the weekend off and know that on Monday morning you get to go back to working on your projects. You're not worried about paying your bills. You've got a sustainable revenue stream for that. The people out there in the world appreciate the contributions that you're making. We've done free as in beer. We've done free as in speech. How about free as in weekend? Thank you very much.
We do have a question for you from the audience. Big companies massively use open source software, profiting from others' work. How can we make them contribute back to the broader community?
You can't make big companies do anything because they have more lawyers than you. And unfortunately, in a lot of places around the world, they now also own the government. But what you can do is figure out alternatives and encourage consumers. The best way to hit big companies is to hit them in their wallets, because you know, there's been a bunch of boycotts recently. You really want to do this, find out the big company that own the thing you don't like, and find out who pays them for advertising, and phone the advertisers and complain to them. And you know, this may or may not work, but and it's difficult. Like, it is almost impossible now to boycott somebody like Amazon, because even if you're like, I am not using Prime Video, I'm not using Amazon to order anything, I'm not using Kindle, half the companies you deal with are probably running on AWS, so some part of the money you spend is trickling back to them anyway. But I think certainly the most fun, the most constructive way is to create and promote alternatives to the big services. One question that I'm sure you can imagine why this has become relevant is all of the big cloud providers at the moment are all consolidated in the United States. And a lot of people are like, why don't we have clouds in Europe? And has anyone heard of StackIt? You know Aldi, the German supermarket? Aldi built their own cloud. And what? And like you go in, you buy some milk, and you maybe can buy a welding mask in the bit in the middle where they sell the weird stuff. And now they'll do cloud services as well. And that to me is a compelling thing: is create and promote alternatives to the megacorps. And if you can influence those to be more ethical about rewarding their contributors and donating back to those projects and those kinds of things, it's not anything like as cut and dried as it might sound. Something like I believe PostgreSQL, an awful lot of the code in that is created by people at Amazon who are on payroll, and they contribute that back. So if you're running Postgres, Amazon is supporting what you're doing. But yeah, it's you can try and fight big corporations, but you're going to lose because they've got lots of lawyers and lots of time. Or you can just create something better and see if you can get everyone to come and use your stuff instead. I don't actually know where the question came from, so I'm kind of looking at all of you. Like, does that answer the question?
That answer, it came online, but yeah, it answers the question.
It was
Thank
online.
You. Yeah.
Any other questions?
We have one more. In
Yeah?
10, 15 years, do you think the usage of open source software will rise and be used more by non-tech consumers, or will the subscription model dominate?
So let me check I got the question right. So open source, next 15 years, increasingly used by non-technical consumers, and will the subscription model dominate?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will, and I think that's just because, do any of you folks have a gym membership you don't use? Because the subscription is easy, because you're like, it's only 15 euros a month. Yeah, I can sign up for that. I can cancel it if I don't use it. And then the barrier, the friction to canceling it, first you need to remember that. And I think, for that reason, I think we are going to see, one non-technical usage of open source, people use the web to do all kinds of things all over the place now. And even if they are not downloading and installing software on their own devices, they are using open source as non-technical consumers, because that's what the web is basically built on. And a lot of companies are like, we put a subscription model on top of all of this kind of stuff. And yes, I think one subscription is incredibly attractive to businesses, because they can go to the bank or they can go to their investors and go, look, this is recurring revenue. This isn't just like we sold a lot of stuff last year. We've got all these customers locked into a recurring cycle, which makes their financial forecasting very smooth. But also, it's easy to sign up for subscriptions and very easy to forget to cancel them when you discover you're not using them. Any other questions, folks?
Looks like that's it for now.
Cool.
Thank you, Dylan.
Total understanding. Thank you.